the rip, chat. What do you think about the Ascension news? Like, good, bad? Do you think it's... What's your gut reaction to the Ascension news? Capping 12 teams is horrendous. Good, good. And then someone says bad. Good question mark. Taki, thank you for the 30 months. 1 year bad, but the other change is good. All right, so a mixed bag. So one of the things that I was noticing is that most of the gut reactions I saw were like, this is really good. If we look at this that I've just brought up, this was like the Reddit thread about it. Because for some reason Brandon Moore's Esports GG article ended up getting more traction from what I saw than the official tweet, but that's fine. So people are saying like, huge, the number one upvoted comment is huge change, good for the partnership scene in my opinion, but less so for the other teams fighting in Ascension, which yeah, that's a bit balanced. I mean, I'm going to go into it in a bit more nuance than a single sentence, but that's not a bad TLDR. The next like comment under that though is, it's an insane change that makes the system perfect now. Never thought I'd see the day. That's so bonkers that's almost like satirical. Like, that is it's not a perfect system. It is absolutely not a perfect system, and I think that people are going to assume it's an excellent change because it's what most of the community have been wanting, which is the system to go in a direction of like promotion relegation. You actually earn your spot. If you have a team in Ascension that does really well, they stay in tier 1. These are the kind of things that Ludwig was talking about previously when he was saying that there was a lot of changes needed to the way that Ascension teams work in order to justify, people really getting involved. But I don't think that it's as perfect as people might think, and so I want to go through it in a bit more detail as to where I see the pros and the cons for this, because I think overall it's actually a bit of a bad move for tier 2, and I think that just because it's something that feels a bit better, I think it's actually going to disincentivize investment in the tier 2 scene. And that doesn't mean that it was a bad decision from Riot necessarily, just because its effects are going to be bad for tier 2. Because sometimes you have to make decisions like this based on the reality of the world and how much people are willing to invest and that kind of thing, and how much people care about certain things. So let's have a look. So starting off, if you haven't seen the announcement, the TLDR is 2025 has performance-based extension for Ascension teams. So instead of being auto-relegated after 2 years, no matter what, even if you won champions after 2 years of being in Ascension, you were going back to challenges. Now, let's be real, right, for a moment. That doesn't mean the players were going back to challengers. That means the org was going back to challengers. If you have a team like, let's use G2 because they're the most successful of the current Ascension teams. If G2 won in next year's champions, right, as they were about to go down, the last hurrah is that they win champions. You're telling me nobody's signing those G2 players? Nobody's signing Valen and Trent and Jonah P and Leaf and stuff? Fuck off. Yes, they are. There's so many people who would be willing to sign them. Just because the org can't keep them in tier 1, the org would get dropped down. So I thought that this was always a weird like straw man that the community and people were talking about, and normally the org owners were talking about it because it would force them to have to give up their players basically, because they wouldn't have the necessary leverage to be able to keep the players. And yeah, that does suck for the org owners, but the way that the community was making that seem like it was really unfair for the players, like the players would survive in tier 1 if they did that well anyway. But okay, now the organization, and therefore the full team, because they'll probably stick together if they did that well, will stay in tier 1 for a bit longer, for another year or maybe longer, depending on how well they play for a long period of time. And then they've connected Premier and Challengers together, which is really cool. Love this, definitely. I'll talk about it a little bit at the end, but it's not really that important. This one's really the big deal. So they're talking about Challenger Leagues as they've integrated this year. I thought it was funny that the 4 Challengers players they mention as being like elite players that got to the tier, they're all European. Woot's Turkish, Miniboo's Lithuanian, Narrate has, well, I guess Narrate isn't European, but he's playing in Europe, and then John and Narrate are like swapped around, right? It's like John's a European player that was playing in Americas, but I thought that was quite funny. But yeah, it doesn't exactly fit it. And yeah, sure, John is not European, but he's part of the EMEA region if he was competing in his home region. Anyway, beside the point. So this is what they're doing. They're removing the auto-relegation and they're replacing it with a performance-based criteria. They've actually got some good performance-based criteria as well. I'll talk about that in a sec. But they're also changing the Ascension term length. So to me, a lot of this reads like, this is what the community wanted, but it's also come in with these things as well. And these are like the necessary bad things that are happening because the Valorant scene and just esports in general is going through a bit of a downturn right now. And these are the ways that you're giving the community like the sugar pill to take it down. Well, I mean, this one's a necessary result of this one as well. So, okay, you don't get auto-relegated, but you only get 1 year when you get to the tier 1 level, guaranteed, and there's only going to be 12 teams in each league. So immediately, let's start at the bottom, 12 teams in each league. So that's 48 teams across the 4 leagues, down from 56 teams, which is what it was going to be with 14 teams in each league. So that's 40 less paid players, right? Because that's 8 less paid teams across the leagues. So that's 8 less org opportunities as well. If you're thinking about investing in Valorant, that's 8 less opportunities than you would have had under the previous system of being able to try to make it at the tier 1 level by getting through Ascension at some point. So spots are more limited than they were in the past. And that inherently is going to disincentivize people to invest time into tier 2 because there's less opportunities. Remember, whenever I'm talking about investment into tier 2, you've got to be considering your return on investment and versus the investment that you're going to make. So if your return gets halved, right, your guaranteed return goes from 2 years to 1 year, that means that you should only be investing half to get the same level of value from the deal. And if your chances of making it to the top level decrease significantly because there's now only 12 teams in each league rather than a potential 14, that also means that you should be balancing your investment because your chances of making it have also gone down too. So, but in terms of the positives, I think there's too many. I think 56 was way too many teams for Valorant. Maybe that's just personal preference, but you're watching all the Valorant that's going on at the moment when there's only 11 teams in each league. It's wild. Even if you're just trying to follow one league, that's going, like, there's a lot of matches. The only people who have too little Valorant to watch are the people that follow one team. Those are the only people, and we had this whole discussion at the beginning of the year. Those are the only people who only tune in to watch. I am a 100 Thieves fan. Well, maybe not even 100 Thieves because they're making it to international events now, but like, I am a DFM fan. I only watch Pool Chan when he co-streams the DFM games. That's the only time I ever consume Valorant esports content, these are the only people that have too few matches to watch. Everybody else has a lot of matches to watch in VCT. Especially if you like watching multiple leagues or just a regional league plus international events, which most viewers do consume their content that kind of way. So having less teams, I think, is a good thing overall. And also 12 is a much better number. 12 works way better for most formats. It's good to split into 2 groups of 6. It's good to split into 3 groups of 4, 4 groups of 3. These kind of formats, they work very well. If you want the top 8 to go through to playoffs, that's good. In 2026, under the previous system, we were going to have 13 teams in a league. Can you design a format that works for 13 teams? Because if so, I want to hire you. Riot wants to hire you. It doesn't work. So the fact that they now have 12, yeah, hallelujah. 2026 format is saved because everything that people were complaining about this year with terrible 11-team formats would have just happened again. everyone would have been excited that 2025 worked well, and then like, oh, you all fucked it up again, Riot. No, just numbers work like that, guys. So anyway, the fact that they now have 12 teams, it's good in that sense as well, because the format for the future is just generally going to be better, and it specifically saves, like I said, 2026 from being pretty dog. So the actual reward system, I think, is really good. I think they've absolutely cooked with this part of it. If an Ascension team makes it to Champions, they get top 4 in their international league, then they extend their term for another year. That's unfathomably based. That's a fantastic thing to put in there. And then if both Ascension teams make it to Champions, the team with the best performance at the tournament stays, while the other team has to compete at Champions for their spot. I think that's also very fair. If a team's making it to Champions as well, they've got a great chance of winning Ascension still. Most of the Ascension teams are not... I think the best Ascension teams end up being normally like in the upper third, just above middle of the pack in the ILs, from what we can tell so far. So I think they've got a great chance of both staying in that situation, but I think it's fair to have the tier 2 teams fight for the spot. And speaking of which, if you make the top 8, as in you make playoffs at the end of the International League, but you don't actually make it to Champions, then you have to go through Ascension, which is going to be tough. That's definitely tough. But I think it's fun either way. Either the team earns it and you know that they're better than the tier 2 squads and they are back in the tier 1 level, or either because they weren't as good as the tier 2 teams, or because they had more tape on them and they were, had a target on their back and that kind of thing. You get to see fresh blood in the scene, and I don't think that that's a bad thing necessarily either. And the relegation, if a team fails to make the Stage 2 playoffs, they're bottom 4 in the international leagues. They just get straight relegated. They don't even get to fight for their spot. And I've seen some people criticizing this as well and saying, listen, just because you're bottom 4 in tier 1, you actually might still be better than all of the tier 2 teams. But I'm going to be real AF with you right now. I'd rather just see somebody else. If we're picking between a bottom 4 team or a fresh team that I don't know whether they're going to be good or not, give me the fresh team. Give me the fresh team. I actually genuinely don't care if that team is worse. At that point, I would like to see change from a fan perspective rather than strictly the best tier 2 teams cycling around, because you never know. Just because they are worse at the time doesn't mean that they will be worse when they play like a full year, or doesn't mean that they won't invest more or pick up somebody new or something like that to improve their chances once they get to the tier 1 level. So I do like this system. I think they've absolutely cooked with this system. And because people wanted some aspect of promotion relegation, and again, I just want to take a tiny tangent here to talk about the obvious elephant in the room throughout all this is only the Ascension teams participate in this up and down movement. It's not the partnership teams. And I just want to let's take a thought experiment for a moment. If you said, this is cool, but I actually want more, I want the partnership teams to also have promotion relegation, I think we just end up in a world where those orgs leave until a non-partnered team wins Ascension, and then they try to buy that team again. I don't think if you get demoted from tier 1 back down to tier 2 and you had a partnership slot, if we're talking about teams like, people bring up the teams that haven't invested in their slot, people like, they like throwing around the names like EG, MIBR, that kind of thing. I think if you have that constant relegation promotion, there just isn't enough of the pie. There isn't a large enough pie for that to function right now. Esports is not big enough. Remember as well, when we're talking about this, even with only 48 teams, if those 48 teams have 5 players and a coach, right? But maybe we just focus on the 5 players. That's still 240 people who are making a full-time career out of playing Valorant at a tier 1 level. They have the minimum salary of the 50K. They're often, a lot of them are going to be on higher than that. The median salaries are going to be significantly higher. And so 240 paid professionals is actually way, way larger than you would expect from the revenue that flows through this kind of space. If you look at traditional sports when they were the same kind of size that we are right now, most people actually had a full-time job and they were doing their pro sport, not even really as a pro, as like a semi-pro. And we've taken the full jump into pro by using a lot of venture capital money and using sponsorship money, some of those sponsors ending up being burnt as a result of that because they don't see the return on it, and promising a lot of growth that hasn't really materialized. Some growth has, but not explosive levels of growth. And so again, part of what's going on right now is a little bit of a restructuring towards making things more reasonable rather than trying to treat it as a startup tech firm where you just pump as much money into it as you possibly can in the hopes that it'll grow and then become profitable in the future. So I don't think it's feasible. I think it kind of undermines the entire point of having a partnership system if you have promotion relegation. We're not in a spot where we can run like the English Premier League, where we send parachute payments down from the top level teams to the lower level teams. The teams at the top don't actually have enough money to send parachute payments down like that. There aren't enough, media rights deals or sponsorship deals or stuff like that, even digital goods deals, to make that a reality. And so I think having a focused core of teams that you can actually support, and so they're incentivized to invest, is a good thing. And as we'll see, I actually already have some issues about whether these Ascension teams are incentivized enough to invest. But I'm kind of trying to focus on the good things at the moment, and I think they've cooked with this. This rewards performance. It rewards investment. It rewards trying to be good with your Ascension team. Even if being good is only top 8 is still a playoffs level team, and I think that's a good metric to use as you're a capable squad. But it is still only that one guaranteed year. Now, just to talk about the one guaranteed year, though, as well, because after this, the article just starts, mostly talking about Premier and stuff like that. But to me, there's an extremely important topic here of just discussing the one guaranteed year. Because like I said, you always have to be thinking about investment versus return on that investment. And so if winning Ascension now only rewards orgs, and the investment that they make in Tier 2, that's only rewarded with 1 year guaranteed at the Tier 1 level. That's only 1 year of digital goods sales. That's how most people are expecting to make significant returns. And from talking to teams as well, those digital goods sales, as in the skins, the bundles, that kind of thing, they tend to go up when you win, up when you visit big events, up when you make playoffs, etc. And then they just plateau when you lose or when you are not playing at an international event and stuff like that. So to have an Ascension team that gets to the Tier 1 level and only gets 1 year guaranteed of that, to me, if I'm trying to put myself in the position of a Tier 2 org owner, this seems a lot worse to me. Because now I get half the guaranteed return on my investment, which means that I should be investing only half the amount that I was previously. You are then incentivized to invest even further money once you hit Tier 1 because you want to try to make top 8, you want to win. You can't just coast for the 2 years. And I know that sounds like a good incentive from the fan point of view. We actually do want these orgs to care once they hit the Tier 1 level and try to perform. But from an org owner's point of view, these two are opposed. The fan wants the org to spend money and invest in their team and make good content and that kind of thing. And Riot also wants that too. But the org owner doesn't want to spend as much money. They want to try to create as much profit as possible from the situation. And if they don't think that those opportunities for profit are there, they might not bother to invest in the first place. And on top of all of this, you now have to win Ascension to make it into the Tier 1 level, assuming that the previous ascended teams make playoffs, champs, do anything, basically. Unless both Ascended teams finish bottom 4 and just get relegated, you have to now win, rather than in the previous model, you had to finish top 2. So again, not only are your chances so much fewer now, there are fewer spots in Tier 1, you have to win rather than make top 2, and when you're there, you only have the guaranteed 1 year. The return on your investment is so much lower, or the expected value is also so much lower because it's less chance that you actually do that, win Ascension, that you shouldn't be making the same investment as you were under the previous model. And yeah, if both of them don't make champs, then they both play in Ascension. And so, yeah, you could make top 2 in that situation, yeah. So, but you're going to be, in theory, facing stronger competition. But yes, yeah, you're right. I should have modified that previous sentence to say, if one of the Ascended teams makes champs, then you must win in your in Ascension. I do want to point out, because some people in the Reddit thread, though, were getting this mixed up. Teams this year did not invest thinking that they only had to make top 2 and were guaranteed for 2 years. They did invest thinking that they were guaranteed for 2 years. I mean, unless Riot communicated this plan with them at the very beginning of the year, but I don't think that's likely because it was so long ago that the beginning of the year started for challenges. But the finishing top 2 and 2 teams ascending, that was starting for the teams of 2025. And that's next year. So the Org owners this year have not been fucked too hard, except that they've invested thinking they were guaranteed for 2 years and they're only guaranteed for 1 year. Which, again, in theory, should mean that you like half your investment in it. So, anyway, returning back to the article for a moment, to discuss some other things that are like fairly good about what's going on here, though, Premier now actually functions properly. If you haven't played Premier in a while because you were just thinking about, like, you know, you enjoyed it when it first came out and you played it with a bunch of friends, but you're not really trying to go pro, so you haven't really been keeping up with what's going in Premier. Premier actually now functions properly. It promotes within divisions. Previously, if you won in Premier, but your rank didn't go up, you just went back into the same level of Premier, which doesn't make any sense. And now, if you win your level of Premier, then you get promoted into the next level, and that kind of cascades upwards towards this invite division that then feeds into challenges. So the Premier system now actually does feed into the path to pro, and they've looked to try to integrate that with Game Changers to help out Game Changers a little as well. But yeah, Premier is now a very good system. I'm going to try to play some more. I don't have very much time. I'm certainly not looking to try to go pro, but they've really done the work on that system, and I think they deserve a huge amount of credit for doing that, because every game talks about a path to pro. Dude, any Overwatch fans remember Crusher 99 and the non-existent path to pro that Overwatch League said existed? It never existed. This is the first time that I've ever seen a game that had a really good system like that. I think Fortnite may have had some kind of system that functioned fairly well, but I think this is certainly the best that I've ever seen anyway. And what I'd like to see them do going forwards, on top of what they've currently changed, is that I'd like to see them I think every 3 years seems reasonable. I would like to see them review the partnership teams that they've made agreements with. I don't know how long. You'll remember on one of the Plat Chat episodes, I was screaming about the fact that somebody should leak the TPA, which is the team partnership agreement. Some people at Riot got in touch with me afterwards and said, that's not cool. You shouldn't have said that. Listen, I just like a strong press. I think that the strength of the press helps a good scene overall. But that pissed some people off at Riot. But listen, I'm still here. I'm still vibing. But I don't know the details of the TPA, which is why I've got onto this. And I don't know the length of it, right? So I don't know how long the legal agreements with their partnership teams are for. some reasonable timeframes would be like 5 years, 3 years, something like that, maybe even 7 years, but you would expect them to be something like that in that rough time frame. I would like to see them, if it's legally possible, for Riot to review the partnership agreements every 3 years and give the boot to some of the organizations that are clearly taking the piss, not completing some of their incentives, not investing in their rosters, mismanaging things, some that have had problems where they're, mismanaging in a sense that isn't just failure to produce results, but failure to manage humans effectively, like mistreatment, anything like that. I'd like to see them review that I think a good cadence personally would be every 3 years and make some changes. I mean, that would put us at the end of 2025 for this first one. But maybe because it's the beginning of the league, you could justify doing one at the end of this year, to be honest, and then 3 years after that. And see whether some of the Ascension teams as they come up justify actually having a spot more than some of the organizations that they've made longer term partnership agreements with. I'd like to see them go in that direction and have regular review processes with the partnership teams, because I think that's necessary for the health of the scene too. But also on that topic, there's there's a lot of talk about a lot of the fans don't really understand which orgs are shit and which aren't. Just because an org doesn't spend outside of their budget doesn't make them a shit org. There are some orgs that spend a lot of money and are quite mismanaged. They don't create good content. They don't have good marketing. They treat their rosters very poorly. They don't have good infrastructure around them, but they pay their players a lot of money. Right? There's much more that goes into it than just have you got good talent on your roster. And it is fairly tough to see from the outside. But Riot have the ability to force their way into those kind of, open the books, interview the players, that kind of thing. Nick Larness, thank you for the prime. So yeah. And I think just to end this segment of talking about Ascension, is the overall change good for Tier 2? Frankly, I don't see how it could be. Because the only people it benefits that are in the Tier 2 scene are those who are confident they are going to keep winning. And really, in sports, nobody knows that. You could have a really crack team that comes through Ascension, and something might go wrong with them in, a year later, and you can't guarantee your team's going to be good for a couple years. Nobody really can guarantee that that's going to happen. You can guarantee that you're going to try to be really good, and you can feel justified that it's a meritocracy now, that if I really put in the work, I'm going to get there. But that's the same bullshit lie that the American dream is built on. Nobody really knows that they can be better than everybody else, and there's plenty of reasons why things might be outside of your control to that degree. But who it hurts, in my opinion, is basically every other org that's looking to invest. The whole point of the Ascension system was that there was a carrot on a stick, and the Tier 2 scene is actually not that juicy, but this carrot is really juicy. Come on, come and get the carrot. Woo! And they throw the carrot away, and you have to and you're running after the carrot, and you're spending money to go and chase the carrot. And if in the end a different rabbit ate the carrot, but next year there's another carrot. And now they've made the carrot half the size and more difficult to chase. But if you get the carrot, you can keep eating more carrots. I don't think I want to be in the carrot eating race. You know what I mean here? So, is it good for Tier 2? I don't think so. Is it good for Tier 1? Yes. I think it's good for the teams that make it to the Tier 1 level to have this continuity with the teams that win. I think it's going to feel a lot better from the fan perspective too, of this team made it to champions. They are good. I see them next year. They earned their spot. It feels good in your soul, it feels good. It feels justified. It feels right. The problem is, it doesn't really work with the economics of the scene, in my opinion. And the other question is it necessary to make a change like this? And I think it was necessary to make a change where we reduce the amount of teams involved in Valorant. From my point of view, I think it was necessary for us to limit the amount of teams to 12 in each league. I do think that was necessary. Do I think it was necessary to have only 1 year of Ascension contracts and the, like, you continue? I actually don't. I really don't. I think that because we haven't seen this happen yet, the community doesn't understand it. But I really think that if you put yourself in the frame of mind of G2 won champions, but G2 get relegated, but all the G2 players just get signed to a different org like Cloud9, is anyone actually mad about that? Maybe the G2 fans are mad about that, but almost all of the fans like players rather than orgs. So I actually don't feel like that would have pissed people off as much as maybe people think they would have been pissed off about it. The likelihood of the whole team being together, sure, that's not... It doesn't always happen, but they would almost always be still in Tier 1. I mean, for example, when EG won, but they couldn't hold on to their players, all of the EG players are still in Tier 1. And it's also, there's no guarantee that just because a team wins champions, they hold on to their players. I mean, Loud didn't hold on to their players. EG didn't hold on to their players, even though the org existed. So, it's ridiculous to say it's a bad thing because those players would break up. Those players break up all the time anyway at the end of a season. So, I think that would have still been fine, but clearly that's not the way that people wanted it to go or thought they wanted it to go. And so, yeah, we find ourselves here. I worry, though, that this... I'd like to hear from Tier 2 org owners, because people like Ludwig were saying that they wanted some system like this, where teams stayed at the top once they earned their spot. And maybe for Ludwig, Mr. fucking Moneybags, who's got a cube made of tungsten or whatever that he lets his chat buy with his credit card, maybe for him, actually the economic incentives don't matter that much and he just wants it to feel good in his heart. But I think for most people who are maybe a bit more business oriented, I think this is a worse change. But I would love to hear what the org owners think about it.